The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
If you watched the show yesterday, listened to the show yesterday, I started it off in kind of a weird way, right? I said, hey, let's pretend for a second that there's no Russia story. We have this whole new scandal, which was that Donald Trump's campaign consultants, Cambridge Analytica, were totally exposed by Britain's Channel 4 as admitting that they used the tactics of blackmail, hiring prostitutes for entrapment and honey traps, bribes, and the dissemination and arguably creation of fake news. And it's Cambridge Analytica of Cambridge, UK. The company's top executive is Alexander Nix, and he personally, as well as others, were caught on camera in what is just a brilliant investigation by Channel 4 in the UK. And the question now, it's not really whether Trump worked with a truly depraved company here, but rather how bad was the stuff that Cambridge Analytica did for Donald Trump. And part two of this investigation, or I guess really it's kind of part three. It's the second part we're talking about, but I think in total it's part three. Anyway, it doesn't matter. A subsequent part of this investigation by Channel 4 has now aired, and it's linking Trump directly to these people who are claiming, this is their assertion, that they handled everything for Donald Trump's digital 2016 campaign. And this is becoming a major, major problem for Donald Trump. And I want to look at some of the clips. I just love good investigative work. And this is right up there. This is some great stuff. Here is one clip where you have Alexander Nix saying that he's met Trump many times, that they ran the whole thing for Trump, and even taking credit in a different segment, I think it might be Mark Turnbull, taking credit for how Trump was able to win despite losing the popular vote by millions. They're targeting, presumably with some of that ill-gotten Facebook data, of course, the reason why we would assume Trump was able to do that, if indeed you believe the digital targeting, was responsible or to blame for that win. Here's clip number one. Take a look.
Have you met Mr. Trump?
Many times.
You have?
We did all the search, all the data, all the analytics, all the targeting. We ran all the digital campaign, the television campaign, and our data informed all the strategy.
When you think about the fact that Donald Trump lost the popular vote by 3 million votes, but won the electoral college vote, that's down to the data and the research. If you did your rallies in the right locations, you moved more people out in those key swing states on election day. That's how he won the election.
He won by 40,000 votes in 3 states.
Only.
Yeah.
The margins were tiny.
The brand was defeat Crooked Hillary. You remember this, of course.
Yes.
Crooked Hillary, and the zeros, the OO of Crooked were a pair of handcuffs, and it was all about.
Like prisoner.
She belongs behind bars.
And you have created this.
Defeat Crooked Hillary. And then we made creative, hundreds of different kinds of creative, and we put it online.
Not exactly coffee boys, right? I mean, as far as they're saying, directly involved in some of the key elements of what, if you believe this is how Trump won, got Trump over the finish line. Here's another clip of Alexander Nix. This is the top guy at Cambridge Analytica, explaining that the way they work, they deliberately keep the candidate out of the loop. The candidate is effectively an uninformed puppet. And I was thinking as I watched this, yeah, that actually does ring a bell. Sounds like somebody we know, right? Let's check out this second clip.
So candidate's the puppet.
Always. I'm absolutely convinced that they have no jurisdiction.
So if the US people ask you, are you working for these people? You will say, no, we don't know them, no?
You say none of your business. You don't talk about our Trump. You say none of your business. I went to speak to them, and the Republicans asked 3 questions.
Yeah, Alexander Nix, who has now been suspended by Cambridge Analytica, was later confronted on the street by Channel 4 reporters, and I just love this stuff.
Mr. Nix, Channel 4 News. Have you ever used entrapment in the past? Because that's what you appear to be offering our undercover reporter.
Well, appearances can be deceptive.
Is it time for you to abandon your political work? Did you mislead Parliament over the Facebook
Absolutely
issue?
not.
Have you lied to Parliament, Mr. Nix?
And then, as I mentioned, Alexander Nix has been suspended by Cambridge Analytica. And once again, these statements that are being put out by the company are just laughable. They're now trying to paint the picture. They just had no idea that any of this stuff was going on when this is what they do, right? Cambridge Analytica put out a statement where they said, the board of Cambridge Analytica has announced today that it has suspended CEO Alexander Nix with immediate effect, pending a full independent investigation. In the view of the board, Mr. Nix's recent comments, secretly recorded by Channel 4, and other allegations do not represent the values or operations of the firm, and his suspension reflects the seriousness with which we view this. Could the statement be any less believable? Alexander Nix, as the CEO of Cambridge Analytica, represents the exact values and activities of the firm. He's getting suspended because he got caught, not because he was acting in some way not consistent with what it is that are Cambridge Analytica's core business practices on a regular basis. Who believes that Cambridge Analytica has been doing this all over the world with glee, from higher-ups up to and including the CEO, and just nobody knew? The board didn't know. Nobody had any idea that this is the type of stuff that Cambridge Analytica does, that this is what they are hired to do. These are liars of the most absurd kind. I would call them Trump-like liars. That's the type of lying that this is. So the questions now are these ethical actors? That's not a question anymore. That's been answered, right? The question, did Trump work with these people? That's been answered at this point. We knew about that. Now the questions that remain are, number one, did Cambridge Analytica participate or conduct illegal activity when they were working for then-candidate Donald Trump? Did the Cambridge Analytica influence campaign operate totally separately from Russia, or were they working in concert? That is another question that we have. And this is just extraordinary journalism. And about a year ago, you might remember, this entire Cambridge Analytica thing sort of started to surface, right? Like, we first heard the name Cambridge Analytica about a year ago, and it was written off by the right basically as a conspiracy theory. And those rightists who acknowledged that maybe there was something there with Cambridge Analytica were using it as a way to attack Hillary Clinton and or Barack Obama. And yet 1 year later, here we are. And the really important thing is, you don't want to get tricked into thinking that these are all minor, unrelated stories, right? I mentioned we don't know if Cambridge Analytica is directly connected to Russia, but we know about the connection between Trump's former very close advisor and chief strategist, Stephen Bannon, holding a stake in Cambridge Analytica. We know about the connection between the Facebook data of 50 million users and Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica admits that they were using that data, or at least some data, which we can guess is that ill-gotten Facebook data for these campaigns. We know about Russian hacking of the DNC and attempts to perpetrate the voting systems of 21 states, at least one of which was done successfully. And we know about some of that leaked information, hacked information from Russia being leaked through an intermediary to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks for publication. And of course, it comes full circle with Julian Assange being in touch directly with Donald Trump. So the pieces individually are all coming to the surface, and we're identifying more and more connections. We don't yet know what the finished puzzle looks like, but we've got a lot of the pieces, and we're starting to put together the edges, if I'm going to carry the puzzle analogy to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, and after this Channel 4 news report, we know that these guys aren't masterminds. because they're oversharing, they're bragging too much. So if there is any criminality there, any connections to the Russia investigation, I think Mueller would find that out.
Yeah, I don't know to what extent Mueller is directly looking at those particular connections, but you would hope that this is going to become, I would presume, an important part of Mueller's investigation. And this now is bigger than Mueller, right? That's the truth, because you've got the FTC and British politicians investigating Facebook for the data piece, the data that ended up in the hands of Cambridge Analytica. You have an investigation in Britain of Cambridge Analytica itself, and it's weird to even imagine how this has now gone even above and beyond Robert Mueller's investigation. It has been just such a major week, truly, and as we've talked about before, the more that this stuff continues to happen, the revelation that Robert Mueller's investigators subpoenaed documents from Trump's business, the Trump Organization, the firing of Andrew McCabe by the ostensibly recused Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and the fact that that now is becoming part of Robert Mueller's investigation, the erratic nature of Trump seems to know no bounds, and it appears that nobody can control Trump, right? And as we'll talk about later, even just direct suggestions from his staff being ignored. Don't congratulate Vladimir Putin on winning that sham election. First thing Trump does when he gets on the phone with Putin is congratulates him on winning that election. We will get to all of that later, but the behavior is growing increasingly erratic, and I look forward to hearing from people in our audience. Does anybody think this is nothing? Send me a tweet, right? I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. I would love to hear from you about it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's do some member thank yous. Today's new member of the day is Joel Gill. Joel, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. What else can I say? This is exactly the mechanism that has funded the program and gotten us from once every other week to 5 shows a week. Today's sustaining member of the day, we're not forgetting about you, is Craig Simon, who's been a member since October of 2011. Nearly 7 years of membership under Craig's belt. And you can join Joel and Craig by signing up yourself at davidpakman.com/membership. If the normal prices, which I find to be very reasonable, but if you find the normal prices a bit high, you can use the coupon code VOTESOON18 to save 40%. And all new yearly members can get either a black or white David Pakman Show bumper sticker at absolutely no cost. You pay $0. I will ship it anywhere in the world if you get a new yearly membership. Just email me after you sign up and say, hey, David, give me one of those sweet, sweet bumper stickers. And what you do with it once you get it, not my problem. And quite frankly, I don't even want to know what some people are doing with that thing. Okay, let's get to Hatriot Mail, the favorite part of the week for many people in our audience, the least favorite part of the week for some Hatriots at least.
Brace yourselves for the only information that can successfully penetrate a tinfoil hat. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
All right, it is appearing once again. It is entering the political lexicon, and it's really only a tiny recess of the internet in terms of the political lexicon. It is that phrase once again. What phrase is it making an appearance in this week's Hatriot Mail? Listen up and you will hear it, no doubt.
Soy boy alert! I'd f***ing punch the shit out of these guy. I'd knock out the pussy soy boys, man. My education is more important than your show. You look like a small soy-poisoned child wearing his dad's work suit for fun. Oh no, not this whiny homo David Pakman again. Intigajin Politics Media.
That's what this program is about, basically. Intigajin Politics Media, and that's what it's been about, and gosh darn it, that's what it's going to continue being about. You can give a middle finger to the Hatriots by using the coupon code Hatriot40 to sign up for membership at davidpakman.com/membership. If you use the coupon code Hatriot40, not only will you get 40% off, but a Hatriot will cry. And that is a very, very exciting thing. Also, quick note, now that we have our new apparel manufacturers in place, we are ready to start taking audience-created graphics and turning them into T-shirts very, very quickly. And an idea I had is some Trump quote shirt design. So if you have some graphic design skills and you're hearing this, search out some funny Trump quotes, incorporate them into some kind of graphic, ideally with a transparent background in high-resolution vector art format, and send them to me, david@davidpakman.com, and we will, I think, be able to very quickly put together some nice designs for David Pakman Show apparel. Anybody whose designs are accepted gets a free couple of T-shirts with their design on it on me. Looking forward to those. Send them in, david@davidpakman.com. Okay, yesterday I told you that there have been countless Russians caught on tape, on video, stuffing multiple ballots at ballot boxes in Vladimir Putin's recent, quote, massive re-election win with, quote, 77% of the vote. And we showed you a bunch of those different videos on yesterday's program. Just an incredible win, as it's been reported. 77% for Putin is a record high in any Russian presidential election in history, except for the fact that dozens and dozens of people are on camera just stuffing piles of ballots in the ballot boxes. So the White House was asked about this, and the apoplexy with which Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders was so obviously staying away from any actual criticism or even acknowledgement of the undeniable reality that this re-election was a total sham scam. And again, that doesn't mean Putin would have lost, but I don't think anybody who is a clear-thinking, rational individual believes that Vladimir Putin got 77% of the vote with 67% turnout. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders asked about this, and it is just absolutely fantastic. Take a listen.
I'm sorry?
Does the White House believe that the election in Russia was free and fair?
Look, in terms of the election, we're focused on our elections. We don't get to dictate how other countries operate. What we do know is that Putin has been elected in their country, and that's not something that we can dictate to them how they operate. We can only focus on the freeness and the fairness of our elections, something we 100% fully support, and something we're going to continue to do everything we can to protect, to make sure bad actors don't have the opportunity to impact them in any way.
Yeah, except you're not even doing that. You're not even doing what you can do to prevent other actors from impacting our elections. But remember, the question was the Russian election free and fair? And the answer was, we don't control other countries' elections. Our focus is our elections, and we can't tell Russia what to do. Wait, hold. She answered a question that wasn't actually asked, and reporters need to get together and hold her accountable. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, that's an answer, but it's an answer to a question that was never asked. What about answering the question we did ask, which is, what is the belief of the White House? What is the position of the White House and of the president with regard to the fairness of the election that took place? If the question had been, does the White House believe that the United States should interfere in Russian elections? Oh, well, okay, she answered and she says, no, the United States shouldn't interfere in Russian elections. But that was never the question. And in another clip, it's just another example of the same thing. Republican Senator John McCain accurately called the recent 77% re-election of Russian President Vladimir Putin a sham election. What does the White House think about what John McCain said? Here is Sarah Huckabee Sanders once again.
The White House disagree with Senator McCain's characterization of this as a sham election.
We disagree with the fact that we shouldn't have conversations with Russia. There are important topics that we should be able to discuss, and that is why the president's going to continue to have that dialogue. At the same time, we've been very clear in the actions that we've taken that we're going to be tough on Russia, particularly when it comes to areas that we feel where they've stepped out of place.
What do you think about McCain calling it a sham election? Anybody who says we shouldn't talk to Russia is wrong. What? No, nobody asked about that. Nobody asked you about talking to Russia. The question is, Senator McCain called it a sham, and we want to know what the White House thinks about that. If the question had been, does the White House believe we shouldn't be talking to Russia? Then the answer given by Sarah Huckabee Sanders might have made even like a tiny bit of sense. Now, here is where it gets really, really good, and that has to do with Donald Trump's response to this election of Vladimir Putin compared to not only what the White House claimed was going to be Donald Trump's response, but also compared to what Donald Trump was advised to do in response to this so-called election of Vladimir Putin. And that's what I want to talk about next. So now it gets really good. I already covered how White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, when asked about the White House's position on the fairness and freeness of the recent re-election of Russian President Vladimir Putin, she didn't answer. She answered questions that were not asked of her. So now let's pull Donald Trump in himself to further our analysis, which really exposes once again just how disconnected the White House is from any just sensible and obvious criticisms of what it is that took place in Russia during the recent election. The White House announced that Donald Trump was not going to be congratulating Vladimir Putin on his election win. And the reason given was, listen, we've had these recent nerve agent attacks. There have been election irregularities. Donald Trump has no plan whatsoever to congratulate Vladimir Putin on his election win. Okay, that actually seems like a reasonable position. That seems good. Trump then gets on the phone with Vladimir Putin and immediately congratulates him for his election win and publicly admits that he congratulated Vladimir Putin for that election win. And we have learned that the White House not only put out a statement saying Trump won't be congratulating Vladimir Putin, but we've since learned that White House advisors, including reportedly H.R. McMaster, specifically warned Trump, do not congratulate Putin on his election win. And in fact, we don't know if Trump read it because he doesn't really read the presidential daily briefings. He's receiving them orally and probably watching Fox News on a TV in the background as well. But in a written document, in all capital letters, Donald Trump was told, do not congratulate Russian President Vladimir Putin for his election win when you were on the phone. Got it. And then we hear the following from President Donald Trump yesterday.
I had a call with President Putin and congratulated him on the victory, his electoral victory. The call had to do also with the fact that we will probably get together in the not too distant future
for tea,
so that we can discuss arms. We can discuss the arms race. As you know, he made a statement that being in an arms race is not a great thing. That was right after the election, one of the first statements he made.
This is the best. First thing, I called him and congratulated him on his election win. Was I not supposed to do that? Because it's only that the White House publicly said I wasn't going to, and I was given a big capitalized piece of paper that said, do not congratulate him. Listen, Trump would have had 77% of the vote like Vlad if it weren't for those millions of people voting illegally. Maybe he sympathizes in some way with the situation that Vladimir Putin finds himself in. And of course, the White House initially saying, well, listen, we've had these nerve agent attacks, the election irregularities, so Trump's not going to congratulate him as a consequence of those things. And then not even mentioned during the call with Putin by Trump, the nerve agent attacks, nor the election irregularities. And I want to, just to put the cherry on top here, we only learned about this initially because the Kremlin said Trump congratulated Putin during the call. The White House didn't say it. Once the Kremlin announced that Trump had called, I guess Trump went out there and didn't try to deny it and said, yeah, you know, I did congratulate the guy. But it's abundantly clear that aside from Trump's bumbling, the White House had no intention whatsoever of admitting that what it announced ended up being the exact opposite of what happened here. But okay, let's at least check whether Trump is consistent, right? Trump congratulated Vladimir Putin, but Trump has never refused to congratulate or speak to world leaders on the basis that their elections were shams, right? Oh, wait, no. That's exactly what Donald Trump did back in August of 2017, when Donald Trump refused to speak with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, stating that Maduro has ignored Trump's calls to hold free and fair elections, among other requests. At the time, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, quote, "The United States stands with the people of Venezuela in the face of their continued oppression by the Maduro regime. President Trump will gladly speak with the leader of Venezuela as soon as democracy is restored in that country." Does it get any more absurd than this? Why even bother lying about it? Why even try when you know that Trump is going to run his mouth or you're going to have a leak? I do not understand the impetus, the desire to lie about even the absurd details, and in this case, blowing up completely in Donald Trump's face. And many discussions about this happening on the David Pakman Show subreddit at davidpakman.com/REDBIT.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm continuing my endlessly fascinating conversation with non-denominational exorcist Rachel Stavis. Her memoir is called Sister of Darkness. It's out now. Rachel, I want to get on to some of the other elements of this that I find to be interesting. How would you know if the exorcism has worked?
Well, again, for me, I can see. I can see when the entity is no longer there. I can see when the trauma and the blocks in the body have been removed. Now, for somebody else who's not me, right, if you can't see in those terms, what I like to go by after that is the sustainability of what's happened.
Right.
So, you know, if you, like, for example, if you go to therapy, right, you go to therapy for an hour, but you keep going back and eventually it gets better. When we do this, we do it, let's say, the same amount of time, let's say it's an hour, but it sustains itself. So that person actually doesn't go backwards necessarily. That's not true with everyone because, hey, free will, we do what we want to do, right? But for people who were really ready, you can tell and you can check in with them months later and they're still in that same space, if not better. So
what evidence would change your mind that exorcism is a real thing? In other words, not that it exists for you, but even hypothetically, like what evidence could you be presented with that would make you say, you know what, I was wrong. Exorcism isn't real. The demons aren't real. The energy that I see visually, it's not real. Hypothetically, what would it take for you to re-examine that belief?
I think the only thing that would make me re-examine that belief, and it's a real long shot here, is if it wasn't working for people. If for some reason everything I was doing stopped working for people all of a sudden, then I would be like, okay, what the hell is going on?
Well, the thing is, it seems like, I mean, if we're going to seriously test that, and I'm curious what you think about this, right? If as serious people we want to test the quote, whether it works for people, you'd really need to have a couple different sort of setups for a test, because you would need to do, so you believe you're an exorcist and a client comes in also believing you're an exorcist, and an exorcism takes place, and then we sort of evaluate their response. But really, that would need to be evaluated compared to bringing in a client who believes that their service provider is an exorcist, but you would want to bring someone in to provide the service who is not a quote, real exorcist like you, who is doing something that they know is not really an exorcism. So you would want to test that, right? Because if someone comes in and a non-exorcist does a, quote, exorcism on them, and they also have the same so-called results, that would really call into question whether this is really like a placebo effect thing that's going on. And then I'm curious whether you're also familiar with the phenomenon of spontaneous remission, right? Which is that anytime you're testing some kind of therapy, and I would call this a therapy, even though I don't think it is therapy per se, there's some percentage of people whose condition is going to resolve on its own. So you would also want to have a control group for that. Why do you think that that's never been done with exorcism?
Well, you know, I can't speak for anyone.
Uh-huh.
Like, here's what I say.
Yeah.
Okay. there are always going to be people, no matter what, and I'm not saying that this is the case here,
Sure.
but even when you have something that's exceptionally scientific and you present fact after fact after fact about it,
Yep.
the reality about people is that they are going to believe whatever they want. So, in other words,
Hold on,
if you-
Rachel. Do you think that the science community believes whatever they want, or they believe what's been demonstrated by the facts? Because I think that that's an important distinction.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily all the science community, but if you're talking about people on a general scale,
Yeah.
if you're talking about the world population, if you're talking about global warming, for example, and you're proposing all of these scientific, accuracies about what's going on in global warming, there are still going to be people who say, no, that's not accurate. It's just the way of the world. This is how we believe.
Right, but
Now-
that's where I think science might be different, because in science, it's not just about a couple of climate deniers. We can still say, well, listen, here's what the consensus is, and here's the basis on which it's built. So I think, I think my disagreement would be that you're sort of framing it as any dissent means that there's not consensus,
No.
right? But that's not true.
No. That's not what I mean.
Okay.
What I'm saying, let me put it this way.
Please.
I would have no issue if someone wanted to measure that and do that experiment with me. I don't know what other people or what other exorcists or what the church or any of that would allow.
No, but it's not. So here's the experiment as I would do it, right? And I think I'm curious, and maybe this could even be done sometime. You would maybe gather, ideally it'd be a big number, right? We'd get a total of 50 people who are in conditions where they are open to an exorcism and they believe in the concept of exorcism. You would see 25 of them and you would do your thing. And then like me or someone else, someone who's not trained as an exorcist would come in. The patients wouldn't know whether they've got the quote real exorcist or not the real one. We would spend 45 minutes in with these people, and then we would see, does the group of 25 that had the quote real exorcist do better than the 25 that were treated by a fake exorcist? And then you would ideally also have another group of 25 who does nothing, and we just check in with them in a month and see how many of them are feeling better with absolutely no treatment. Is that something you would be open to? Like, do you think exorcism's results would stand up in a test like that?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. If
Wow.
you put it together, I will participate.
That would be stunning. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I've always thought that I believe that what I do is not, it's somewhere where myth meets science. Let's put it that way, right? And I do believe that very wholeheartedly.
Wow.
I don't believe that it's been measured. I don't believe that people have spent the time or put the money in, or even if we have everything we would need to measure that, right? But
Well,
if we
I don't
do-
know. I mean, there are like the James Randi Foundation has had a long-standing $1 million prize for anyone who can demonstrate psychic abilities. And I know you're doing exorcism, not psychic abilities. Psychic abilities in a demonstrable scientific environment. I know there are similar prizes for other assertions, and I don't know if I want to call them supernatural assertions or sort of pseudoscience or fringe science or whatever else. I mean, I think there's certainly the willingness. I guess my question, Rachel, is if this is real, why hasn't the scientific community embraced it? It's sort of like when people talk about aliens, right? And you hear from people who believe in alien abductions and they go, listen, David, it's a cover-up because the scientific community doesn't want it getting out there. If you meet any astronomer, it would be abundantly clear that if we had real evidence of contact with aliens, this would be the most exciting time in the history of astronomy. Like, there would be no way that the scientific community would collude to cover up evidence of aliens. I guess what I don't get as a skeptic is, why doesn't science accept that there are psychics and demons and exorcism? Like, what is it? Why is there interest to cover that up,
Well, I don't know if they're covering it up. I think they're just predisposed not to believe it. I think the spiritual world is something that people are predisposed not to believe in.
Really?
So, yeah, 100%. Look, that's the whole thing. It's in this particular world, right?
Yeah.
In this particular world especially, and I'm not saying this is not the case for other things, but in
Right.
this particular thing, people want absolute proof ahead of time. Right? They absolutely need to know that this exists. Why? Because they're predisposed to believe it doesn't.
But
So
I don't think
now-
that's true. I mean, I just don't think it's true of the science community. I think if you went to the science community and you said, let's actually set up the double blind with a placebo exorcist and a control group receiving no treatment, I think you would find science, the scientific community, very open to it and not go in with any preconceived notions, which is the point of a double-blind test.
Well, and as I say, I'm open to it.
Yeah. Well, listen,
I'm
we should set that up because I think that it could be an amazing experience
It would actually be very
for everybody involved. Hey, one thing I want to go back to, Rachel, before we wrap up. You mentioned at the beginning of the first part of the interview that at a certain point when this all started, you questioned, do I go in for therapy or do I go a different direction, which is to acknowledge that you're seeing these entities and become an exorcist? What made you go one way and not the other? In other words, what does distinguish this from something that someone might go in and seek mental health counseling for?
Well, I'll tell you, and I think the answer is going to be the opposite of science, and it's faith. That's what does it. So not, that's not, again, even that is not for everyone. But for me, it was about faith. And it isn't that I should clarify, too, that I never questioned what it was that I had. I didn't think, I make jokes about it, but I never thought I was crazy. Now you may think differently. But
I wouldn't evaluate something like I'm not qualified to make that assessment,
Well, I mean, just in general, you might think differently.
Yeah.
But for me, I knew that there was a reason why I had this. And the bottom line at the end of the day, no matter what you believe, is that I help people. And if what I have is leading to help people, then there's really nothing that's being done that's harmful. In fact, it's making people better. And so regardless of the belief systems behind that, whether you can get with that or you can't, is working for people. And even if you can't see what I see, that's the thing that I'm very excited about. And that's the thing that I do. And that's why I do it for free. It's because I want to help people.
Are you able to sense whether I have any demons or creatures attached to me?
Well, I can't see you.
Okay, so you have to see the person. You've got to see the person in order to. Does it have to be in person, or can you do this via Skype?
I can do it via Skype. It's harder for me, though, to be honest, because I again, completely non-scientific answer here, because I have to tap into that energy a little harder. They're not with me in my space, right? So
it's got to be like a really high-speed connection, in other words.
Yes, for me, in my mind.
Yeah, got it. Well, listen, Rachel Stavis, endlessly fascinating, truly. She is a non-denominational exorcist. She doesn't charge for exorcism, we've learned. Her memoir is Sister of Darkness. Wow. I mean, I think you've said it all, and I'm going to be really processing this interview for some time, and I really, really appreciate you talking to me about it.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
If you ever watch Fox News, and who could blame you if you don't, you might be familiar with the face or name of retired Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, a longtime Fox News contributor on the network. He has quit in shame, self-described shame, saying he's ashamed of the network's coverage, and he emailed his colleagues, and that email has been obtained by BuzzFeed. And if his name rings a bell and you don't watch Fox News, it might be because this is the same guy who was suspended by Fox News in 2015 for calling President Obama a, quote, total pussy. We covered it at the time during an appearance on the Fox Business Network. I've excerpted just the relevant parts of Ralph Peters' email to his colleagues explaining why he's going to be quitting Fox News, where he said, quote, I feel compelled to explain why I have to leave. I swore to support and defend the Constitution, and that oath did not expire when I took off my uniform. Today, I feel that Fox News is assaulting our constitutional order and the rule of law while fostering corrosive and unjustified paranoia among viewers. Over my decade with Fox, I long was proud of the association. Now I am ashamed. Fox has degenerated from providing a legitimate and much-needed outlet for conservative voices to a mere propaganda machine for a destructive and ethically ruinous administration. When primetime hosts who have never served our country in any capacity dismiss facts and empirical reality to launch profoundly dishonest attacks on the FBI, the Justice Department, the courts, the intelligence community in which I served, and not least a model public servant and genuine war hero such as Robert Mueller, all the while scaremongering with lurid warnings of deep state machinations, I cannot be part of the same organization. Fox News is now wittingly harming our system of government for profit. Going on to say, as a Russia analyst for many years, it also has appalled me that hosts who made their reputations as super patriots and who justifiably savaged President Obama for his duplicitous folly with Putin now advance Putin's agenda by making light of Russian penetration of our elections and the Trump campaign. And by the way, as an intelligence professional, I can tell you that the Steele dossier rings true. That's how the Russians do things. The result is that we have an American president who is terrified of his counterpart in Moscow. Fox News has crossed the line for the guy who called Obama a total pussy, right? This is a real, hardcore, ideologically committed right-winger. And he is calling out Fox's propaganda and calling out Trump as being Putin's puppet. And all of a sudden, he goes, in the eyes of the Fox News audience, from conservative hero to unpatriotic stooge as far as they're concerned. And I want to be super clear here. Ralph Peters is no hero. He is not even an admirable person. He has a long, long track record of the most horrifying and disgusting views and statements. He is truly a raging clown, but even he sees what it is that's going on at Fox, and he talks about his decade with Fox News. During that decade, Fox News was going after Obama for his choice of mustard, right? And Peters apparently felt okay staying then. So I'm not making this guy appear to be a good guy in any way, Pat, but what I am telling you is that someone as heinous in their views as this guy even sees what's going on.
Judging by that statement, he wants virtue bestowed on him for making this decision, it seems. And he
too
wants
late.
to be treated like a hero, but yet he was complicit for that 10-year period.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think Fox News has gotten worse since the Trump administration began.
No, it's been, and you know what? I don't think it's that Fox News has necessarily gotten worse. It's just that at this point, it's even harder to pretend like we don't see what's going on. Like when Bush was president and they were all talking constantly about just how great he is and how great everything is, it was at least a more coherent narrative in terms of how the sort of ideologically committed right-winger would buy into it. But now it's getting even hard for the ideologically committed right-wingers to just pretend that the Fox narrative is the accurate one. And listen, he made the right decision, albeit 10 years too late.
Right, and now Fox News is going after the intelligence community, and he said that he served the intelligence community.
Yeah.
So he's saying, oh, now it's like you're attacking me. It feels personal now.
Yeah, let's not pretend that this is anything but a guy who has been totally complacent and complicit in the garbage from Fox News, who just sort of feels like he's been pushed over the edge, maybe partially because he feels personally attacked by the narrative from Fox News about the intel community. Right decision, glad to see him go, not a hero, should have done it a decade ago. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this since it's not really the type of story that we can really add too much to, but it's been in the news for days and it all came to a head very early this morning. So I do want to mention that the serial Texas bomber who's been terrorizing mostly Austin, Texas, as well as some nearby locations with a variety of package and parcel bombs is now dead after blowing himself up. Police started closing in on the 24-year-old white male in a hotel parking lot in Round Rock, Texas, very late last night, less than 20 miles from Austin, found inside his car. This is the individual believed responsible for 5 explosions. You'll see as we look at them on a map for our television audience, 4 in Austin plus 1 at a Federal Express facility, FedEx facility in Schertz, Texas, closer to San Francisco, as well as a bomb stopped from exploding at another FedEx facility. And the way this went down is that police waited for a SWAT team to arrive when they tracked this individual to his vehicle. The suspected bomber started driving away, eventually stopped on the side of the I-35 frontage road in outside Austin, Texas. SWAT approached, and the bomber detonated a bomb in the vehicle, and it injured one of the SWAT officers. Ultimately, he also, the bomber was shot by a SWAT officer, and we actually don't know whether the medical cause of death was the bomb that he set off himself or being shot by the SWAT officer. but the total death and injury toll from this harebrained reign of terror is 2 dead and 5 injured, of course, not including the bomber himself. And there are already some indications from a suspected blog of the bombers that he is a self-described conservative who was against gay marriage. Who knows? We'll see ultimately if that ends up being his blog or someone with the same name. The real questions now are, why did he do it? From a public safety perspective, did he leave behind more bombs, either in the mail or in the FedEx delivery system, or maybe in public? He utilized a tripwire on one device. And it's horrible to have to extend this, but we have to recognize that parcels can take several days to work their way through the mail and package delivery system. So it's possible that something was mailed and is still there. People in the area still being told to be very vigilant about weird packages that they're not expecting. And then the other question is, did he act alone? And that's actually a big question, because if he did act alone, then presumably within a couple of days, any packages sent by this individual would either have exploded or hopefully been diffused, identified and diffused. If he's not acting alone, I think we can all kind of imagine that it's not a good situation. And I actually, a lot of people online think they're glad that this guy is dead. I'm glad he's no longer able to do the things he was doing, but I would actually much prefer being able to have law enforcement interview the guy and figure out what are the motives, because we often never learn in these depraved cases what actually were the motives of the perpetrator. I think that that would be incredibly useful to us. And one interesting little thing I was thinking of, all along, media reports mostly would talk about he, when referring to the bomber, sort of assumed that we're talking about a male here. And it's accurate, right? Like, it's never a woman that is involved in this type of thing. And I actually wonder, like, do law enforcement agencies even have to discuss that? Like, do they sit around and they go, okay, anybody think we might be looking for a woman? No, it's a male we're looking for. Or is it just so obvious that this is the work of a man that it doesn't even have to be discussed, that law enforcement just knows?
Yeah, same thing with shootings, too. Right after a shooting, we don't typically know the race or the religion of the perpetrator, but we always know that it's a man. You don't even need a gender-neutral term for it. You don't need to say gun person. It's always gun man.
Or they. You sometimes hear they as opposed to he. And I know some people will write to me and they'll say, David, that's wrong. Here is an example of a woman who participated in a bombing. Here's an example of a woman who participated in a shooting. And of course, statistically it exists, but it is almost never the case. And I wonder whether that is made explicit by law enforcement who works on a case like this, or if it's just they figure, statistically speaking, it's probably a white male between 20 and 45 years old, which is typically what it is. I had a conversation yesterday with my girlfriend and before we knew anything about the identity, and she said, what do you think the profile is eventually going to be? And I said, probably a white male aged 20 to 45. That's what it usually is.
The motive, we don't always know for sure. Like,
Definitely.
He could have been a right winger, could have been a left winger. Now it seems like he was a right winger.
Yeah, and in fact, they were trying to push the narrative that bombs are sort of more like a left-wing eco-terrorist or Antifa type of thing. And listen, so far it appears he was a right winger, but clearly somebody who, this is not an excuse, but who also was severely mentally disturbed, which anybody would have to be in order to do something like this. We have a voicemail number, and that number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Let's take a listen to this voicemail that came in.
You always call your show progressive, but it's not. It's Democrat. If you call out corruption and evil when the Republicans do it, but you give a free pass to the Democrats when they do the same damn thing, well, that's not being progressive. That's being a Democrat, and that's being hypocritical.
Okay. Well, listen, I reject 100% the assertions being made here. Number one, from a purely logistical standpoint, I've never been a registered Democrat in my life. Number two, I am the first to tell you that on so many important issues, there's effectively no difference between the cronyism and status quo corruption of Democrats and Republicans. So maybe you meant to leave this message for a different show, but I don't think it really applies to this one. We've got a great bonus show planned for you today. We will talk about the first Guantanamo repatriation under Trump getting closer to being a reality. A woman who has died after undergoing so-called bee acupuncture, a treatment touted by pseudoscience advocate Gwyneth Paltrow, and also a satirical book parodying one written by Mike Pence's daughter has jumped to #1 on the bestseller list, and it is very, very funny. Get access to the bonus show by being a member, davidpakman.com/membership, or by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/davidpakmanshow. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.